Coronavirus pandemic or COVID-19 outbreak has caused widespread concern and economic hardship for consumers, businesses, and communities across the globe. Banks and NBFCs across the globe are offering deferred payments and credit cards, loans, and mortgages for consumers and businesses. The pandemic has increased the financial industry's focus on digital offerings along with demand from consumers to use them. With bank branches shut and long waiting times for phone support, even previously nervous digital users have turned to these channels. In our next Power Pack panel discussion, we are joined by Varun Malhotra, partner, Kona Capital, who will be moderating the session. And Varun is joined by Lizzie Chapman, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, Zest Money, Balu Ramachandran, Chief Business Officer, Simple, Ram Gopal Subramani, Chief Operating Officer, Perfios. One of the speakers in the panel, Madhusudan, member of FinTech Association for Consumer Empowerment and co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Credit B, was expected to join us for this session, but unfortunately, he could not be here due to an emergency. Nevertheless, we have an amazing panel here, and with that, I would like to welcome the panel and thank everybody sitting here for being with us today. And with that, I would like to pass on the mic to our session moderator, Mr. Varun, who will take the discussions forward. Over to you, Varun.
Great. Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much for that introduction. Super excited to be, hosting this panel where we discuss lending during the pandemic. I can't believe it's been almost a year and a half now since, this entire ordeal started, and we've come a long way. We're still not out of it, but we've come fairly a long way. And I'm excited to have, Lizzie, Balu, and Ram joining us here right now and sharing their insights. So super excited to learn about their experience over the last 1.5 years and how they've been sort of crusading through this entire pandemic situation. Great. So as we dive right in, I'd request each of our panelists to maybe start off with a short introduction about themselves and and their organizations before sort of responding to the questions. So maybe you'll start right away, jump right in with Lizzie. So Lizzie, this has been going on for a fairly long period of time. We've come out of first wave, which took a fairly long time. We entered the second wave, which hopefully we're now kind of out of, and let's see what the future holds. But we've already gone through two cycles of this. So what's your experience been? Clearly the first wave was, it was a completely new unknown situation. We were all firefighting and grappling with this real time. Hopefully, when the second wave hit, nobody expected it, but we were still a little bit wiser. So what was your experience across the first wave and the second wave? And, how was the impact different for you?
Sure. And just to explain, Zest Money is one of the largest buy now, pay later platforms in India. And throughout both waves, we've been operating both in the digital world, so working with e-commerce and travel partners to facilitate BNPL, but also in the physical world. So we launched our in-store product just at the beginning of the pandemic, interestingly. So it's been a fascinating experience. Definitely a tale of two waves. Obviously, the humanitarian and social impact of the second wave was significantly worse. But I think, as many of the guests will explain today, from a fintech perspective and from a business resilience perspective, this second wave was a completely different story to the first wave. And let me quickly explain why. We think of it in two parts. There is the demand side. So how much did our consumers and our retail partners want or need us? And then there's the supply side. How much did we want to give them access to credit at that time? In the first wave, both were completely shell-shocked, right? So consumers, retailers were completely locked up. I remember discussing with Flipkart when the initial lockdown announcements came out. They said it'll be a few days and then we'll figure this out. And obviously weeks later, still e-commerce deliveries were not happening in key cities. So it was a completely devastating time for the industry. Consumers were also living in fear of what was coming economically, and therefore even their demand was reduced. So consumption really hit rock bottom. We could manage risk as well at that time because of that. So we pulled back extremely aggressively, probably more than 50-60% of our risk tolerance came down. What that did, though, is put us in a very confident position as we came out. So by the time the second wave hit, I think we, as a lending business, had never had so much confidence in our risk models, collections practices. And at the same time, that demand side had come back with a vengeance. We did not see the same severity of lockdowns. Consumer confidence bizarrely held up despite, the horrific scenes on the ground. But what we saw was customers were actually ready to switch their behavior from physical consumption to digital, including in-store. So our in-store really took off as customers said, I don't want to deal with a physical agent, let me use a digital product. So bizarrely, the second wave, from a business perspective, including the risk piece, was very, very successful for a business like ours. And I think the whole BNPL world has seen that, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that insight, Lizzie. And of course, here at Kona, we cover emerging markets globally as a fintech VC. So we see this interesting, comparison and contrast across markets like India, Indonesia, Brazil, and how the waves have impacted. But I think this has been a fairly secular trend wherever, COVID has come back in the form of a second wave. I think consumer resilience has been really strong despite facing probably the worst humanitarian and health crisis in a lot of the markets. But consumers, have been the quickest to adopt, right? Yeah. The resilience and the demand that existed. We see a lot of those trends across other markets as well. And, just switching gears, so obviously, customer segments across fintech lending, it's not a monolith. It's made up of different, types of customers, segments, use cases. And on that point, Balu, would love to hear what your experience has been, on individuals and gig economy workers if you work with them. What's been your experience on seeing trends from the customer segment?
Yeah, sure. And before I go there, right, so just to explain a little bit of context of what we at Simple do. Mm-hmm. So we are essentially a business that allows us one-click checkout experience on the internet, right, which is the fastest possible checkout experience that is catered to in the Indian payment system. And it is, with a less than 1% failure rate, right? So it just improves significantly the NPS scores for a lot of the consumers who transact in online merchants. And what we have essentially seen during the waves of COVID is that, hey, we had a massive resurgence of consumers shifting behavior from moving offline to buying online. And, while there were some areas that were hit, like urban mobility, for instance, right? But there were lots of others which actually drew a lot of consumers. And if you think about, going back to your question, right? If you think about the users such as, individuals, gig economy workers, etc., I think there was, yes, some areas that were impacted, but as Lizzie mentioned earlier, the consumer confidence, especially that confidence of buying online, for a lot of use cases which people would not have done online earlier, be it pharma, be it a lot of other use cases, right? The confidence actually increased significantly, and there was a significant amount of traction. And for us as a business as well, right? So we were cautious in the first wave. We've been stupended by the consumer confidence and the demand actually. And if I look back at where we were, say, last year before the COVID impact hit us to where we are now, we would have grown by maybe orders of magnitude of 7-8 times from where we were earlier, right? So that's been massive resurgence. It's been superly positive, and all of this growth has come on the back of what we look at in terms of delinquency for our customers, because ultimately our business is powered by underwriting a certain line of credit, though it is for high frequency, low average order value transactions, and that's held up really well. In fact, it's actually become better than what it used to be pre-pandemic, right? So it's been superly positive for us. I think the segments of consumers that you spoke about actually taken on to online as well as online BNPL options significantly.
Got it, fantastic. And Lizzie, Balu, both of you work on the consumer lending side. Have you observed any marked differences across, say, salaried professionals versus those that are self-employed? And then, of course, you have the larger bottom of pyramid or gig economy worker kind of population. So any trends that you can identify there?
We had actually a couple of very positive trends, positive surprises, let me put it like that proved our hypothesis and why we exist at Zest. We believe in using alternative data and more real-time signals in underwriting compared to obviously traditional credit card companies, for example. And what we found is that those models responded very quickly through the pandemic, and we actually began to see better credit risk in our new-to-credit customers. So customers who had come to us completely credit naive, new to credit, were performing more strongly than our salaried and so-called prime customers. That was a fascinating observation, and what it told us is that underwriting and credit risk is not just about your models, it's also about the relationship you form with the customer. And by being there for them through such a challenging time, offering early prepayment, offering restructuring proactively, etc., we were being rewarded by those customers, and we were seeing, exceptional credit behavior and credit performance. Similarly, second one was in the self-employed segment. So our models had predicted we would see more credit pain in self-employed versus salaried. We saw the reverse, especially in the first wave. So again, we believe that is due to the fact a self-employed customer has fewer other credit relationships and therefore will behave positively on the one that they value most, which was Zest.
Got it. No, super fascinating. And we will, double click on one of the points that you just mentioned on how do you work with these consumers in a pretty distressed situation for them. But before we jump onto that, it'll be good to hear from you, Ram. At Perfius, of course, you have a much broader view of the market across all customer segments, right? So, what have you observed in, the non-consumer lending part of the business, maybe on the micro SMEs side of things?
Sure, Varun. Yeah, so like you said, right, we work across all customers. Now we work across all customers in India and another 17 geographies, okay. And what we saw in wave one was pretty much, especially with a big impact on the engagement with customers. I mean, especially you look at the micro SME and even the SME segments and all those things, right? The engagement was largely in person. Okay. There are two impacts. One was organizations not being ready. Their teams were not ready to engage with customers digitally. Second was the customers were not ready. So, which I think was the first half, if you look at the last year, the first 6 months was pretty much bad across the board for everyone, right? But then the resurgence happened, and I think the Q4 was very good. And what we saw in the second wave was, the impact was very little across the board. Even the largest institution, even large PSUs, okay, who you would think are pretty slow, right? All of them had a digital operation. So which meant that it's not just a digital application, but the field force was able to engage with the customers completely on this part of it. So which is where, even though the impact was relatively less. I mean, there's probably a 20 basis point drop in the volumes in April, May time period. Right now, what we see, we are beyond Feb 20 numbers, okay, across the board. So which is where I think the resilience clearly came across. The ability and the other part which we saw was across the board was digital was not anymore a tick mark, right? Okay, it was not a KPI. It was a business reality. So the number of implementations that got rolled out, and in a true digital sense, right? All the way from the acquisition to decisioning to engagement, those solutions were completely out there. So in the last, I think, the number of products that have been rolled out, like whether it was in a large HDFC Bank, SBI going with loans on YONO, right? Bank of Baroda, you look at Canara Bank, okay, you look at even many of the micro SME players who were still heavily feet on the street engagement, now they had completely different models, okay. So that was the first part. So I think that is where the transformation is real. So which is where, again, going back to the part that consumer behavior, right? Now, even business behavior has changed. It is not just about consumer adopting. Businesses have accepted the fact that this is the way in which you're going to engage, right? Which is where. So I think that is a big shift. The other part was obviously risk. Everyone is still very attuned to risk. I think one of the good things which the government did was bringing the credit guarantee scheme. So which is where there was a lot of impetus, and you saw a lot of loans being dispersed on the credit guarantee scheme, and that was very necessary for small businesses, okay, right? So even when Bank of Baroda had this street vendor program, which was very successful, okay, but that was money which was desperately needed for them. It might have not been a large ticket size, but that was kind of necessary for them to revive the businesses. So which is there. And the other part is, interestingly, on the micro SME side, right, they were heavily cash, okay, before the pandemic first wave, okay. The notion that a rupee note can basically be a transmitter of the virus was such an influencer, which demonetization did not do. Everyone is on an app, right? Now you look at earlier you'd probably see a small SME I mean, even though they probably had a footfall of, let's say, 100 transactions a month, right? Cumulatively, you'll probably see a bank statement which has probably 100 line items. Now you're suddenly seeing some 30,000 line items for a month. These are really micro transactions. Okay. So the consumer behavior started reflecting in business. So that segment which was data poor is suddenly a lot more richer, and it is not about assessing the footfall and all those things, right? There's a lot more data which is available, which is a part. So that is where I would say a lot of character shown in the whole industry, okay, across the board. I mean, irrespective whether someone is lending 10,000 or someone is lending 50,000 crores, okay, right? That was a big shift, and I think the organizations are geared. That is why although the impact on people in the second wave was terrible, right? Okay, so which meant that the ability to service or having people at the organizations to manage those engagements, that was impacted significantly. But then I think the recovery is there, and hopefully this should just move forward.
Yeah, fingers crossed we're out of it and to more stable times going forward. But you're absolutely right. I think the push to digital, I think what we've seen in the last one and a half years probably compares to what we saw in the decade prior to that. So that's been one of the slightly positive fallouts of the situation that we're in. And one of my founders on the agricultural lending side, he described it beautifully well. He said, digital is no longer a channel for people. It's no longer one part of the business. It's just become a way of doing business now. And both from the consumer side as well as from the operator side, it's you don't have an option. Digital is just the way things are moving. But it's also been a very confusing time for customers as well, on borrowers particularly. Last year we saw this entire wave of moratorium, and there's a fair degree of gray areas and uncertainty on how to deal with it, who is it right for, how is it applicable. And so how did you go about, Lithi, how did you go about handling that from just the lens of hand-holding the customers to make the right choices, and first informing them what the choices are,
Yeah.
and then guiding them to the right outcomes?
No, it was an incredible time, actually. We, as a completely digital technology and product-led business, had an even greater challenge, right? So literally millions of customers, tens of thousands of retailers started picking up the phone, and we're a few hundred people in a remote, dispersed office. So we realized immediately that day when the moratorium was announced that we had to react with a completely digital solution immediately. And we set a challenge to our team: let's be the first consumer lender to go out with a very clear policy and product in the next 24 hours. Let's be, the first to do that, so that our customers reward us with their trust in us, right? So we did. We worked through the night. I remember there was a lot of very, very late night, all night phone calls, conference calls going on, making decisions about how we would implement this policy. As with everything we do, digital first and consumer first. So we said, let's solve for the customer. If we solve for them the best, we will actually reduce our credit risk, and our lender partners who we work with on the back end, our banks, our NBFCs, will be pleased with that. So by solving for the customer first and being the fastest, we were actually able to go to our lender partners, get their buy-in for this process and product, and actually to some extent even shape the way they were thinking about the moratorium. We then repeated exactly the same thing when restructuring was announced. We actually spent a few months predicting what the restructuring program might look like. We looked around the world. We spoke to other portfolio companies of our investors to understand how restructuring worked in different markets. And we actually built a prototype restructuring product ready in case that came as a regulatory announcement. And again, it did. So within 24 hours, we could be one of the first consumer lenders in the market with a restructuring product. These all sound like really exciting product developments, but ultimately it was about being there for the customer, and exactly what you said, giving them this confidence and affirmation at a time of complete uncertainty, which then led them to behave in a more creditworthy way. So net, win-win-win for the ecosystem.
Absolutely. No, that's super interesting to hear, Lizzie. And Balu, in your sort of first response, to the crisis and helping customers, how did you go about it during that time?
Yeah. So for us, I think because we enable these microtransactions online, and we really take the friction away from paying online, the quantum of outstanding loans or credits is actually pretty small, right? But still, I think we had incoming requests coming in from our consumers asking for restructuring and taking out payment dates to further and so on and so forth. And as Lishan mentioned, right? So it was completely remote working, and some of our smaller teams, the customer service, etc., adapting to the situation was really, really tough. But we managed to pull through very, very quickly. And what I think fundamentally has helped is that consumers, when they see the value of a product such as this, right, and when they see that, hey, the reason why I'm going online is significantly increased, and then I need a frictionless checkout experience for that actually enabled them to understand what we do far better, and actually helped us then work with them to give requirements that they had. If we had to move out payment schedules for 2 months, for instance, and so on and so forth, it actually enabled us to work with the consumers really, really well. In fact, as I mentioned, all of that has actually resulted in a very, very positive outcome for us, that we've massively improved our user base of consumers, and delinquencies have gone down. And so it's whatever, I think, testament to the team that actually pulled through very, very quickly during that time, that we managed to do what is right for the consumer actually.
No, that's fantastic, and especially as fintech lenders, I think the onus lies on us as operators and part of the ecosystem, where self-regulation, putting the customer first, having really strong consumer protection norms is sort of an imperative to be operating in this industry, as we're laying down some of the foundational elements right now. But obviously in this entire virtual experience now, where you're dealing with customers completely digitally, you don't have any face-to-face interaction, any engagement, and this is particularly probably true for the SMEs and the larger ticket loan sizes. But Ram, did you notice any changes in the risk patterns? Did you see any increasing trends of maybe perhaps fraud coming on that didn't exist earlier? Did life change?
See, yeah, definitely. Just the part, right? So being a tech enabler for all these customers, right? The first part was challenge of looking at data, right? Now there was no prior thing, right? So what is the behavior of customers before COVID and after COVID became the first part of the dimension of information, right? Okay. So that was the first part where there was pretty much a lot of things was, again, there was a lot of uncertainty, right? Now, when is this going to come out? Do I look at past performance was a non-starter, right? It was at this point of time, what is the performance and how do you kind of make a judgment on it? So which is where a lot of information and how the data was being consumed became very, very important. The number of attributes they started looking at and the duration of data. I mean, we saw patterns where people changed the thing, instead of looking at 3 months, they said 6 months, right? Or 15 months, okay, right? So which was one big change. But the other part is, as you said, right, as it became completely without touch, okay, how do you validate information? So a lot of emphasis came into cross-validation, right, the cross-analysis of different forms of data. I mean, as simple as this, I think there was some of the things obviously became infrastructure coming in, like financials, everyone's financials got postponed, right? Everyone's filing got postponed, income tax filing got postponed, okay. Now, it is known industry practice that you show financial for borrowing versus filing. They're completely different. Okay. So now verification of this data, whether you're checking whether the CA who filed the return, there's a URIN number. Does that hold true, right? Was there a return filed? Okay, GST return and all. So those emphasis started coming in more in terms of verifying the data, right? Cross-validating it. That was a part. So in this process, you started seeing certain patterns of risk, right? Okay, and obviously, as it became completely digital, okay, how do you assess who's the customer, who's in front of you, right, versus who's applying? Okay, so in that sense, we did see some parts of patterns of morphing of information. How do you detect that, and then kind of build into that pattern mechanisms? So that is this thing. So which is where, and I think organizations had to adopt for that kind of behavior change. Okay, see, that's the thing, which is where it was.
Got it. Yeah. No. And obviously this has impact. Not just in terms of how you look at the data or how do you assess, but it has implications on the entire business model itself, right? How we go about doing things. And I know that Balu, for you also, I think the entire journey has always been digital first, right? Were there any changes on the business model itself that you guys had to bring about to accommodate for this?
I think just listening to what's generally been happening in the industry, and I think Ram and Easy have spoken about some of the changes. For us, it was not that drastic from a business model standpoint because we were always only digital, right? We were not digital first. We were not digital as an option. We were only digital. We were used to seeing our consumers digitally. We were used to getting their information digitally. We were used to approving them digitally. And more importantly, right, working with the ecosystem of merchant partners to enable this to happen. And that's the core of what we do, actually working with the merchants, right? So for us, from that standpoint, I think the first wave just made us, batter down the hatches, make sure that, hey, nothing is breaking. Are we getting the same quality of data? Are we getting, all of that? And it took maybe, 1 or 2 cycles for us to test that out. But after that, very interestingly, what's been is to actually restructure ourselves for the growth that this whole thing brought about, right? This entire shift of buying behavior towards online and adoption. Of course, it's been happening in the works for many years in India, as all of us know, but the adoption of other payment modes and all of that, and as frequency increased, I think people such as ourselves in BNPL kind of saw the value of that. Users saw the value of that, and so hence adoption for us increased. And that's really what we actually set up for. Just making sure that we can manage the scale. It means, a lot of investment starting, at the very least, it's our people, but more importantly, it is about our tech platforms. How do we enable restructuring the tech architecture for scale and so on and so forth. And of course, in all of this, it's been, as I said, super positive, but that's the effect that's had on our business.
Got it. And Lizzie, you spoke of something earlier, particularly the relationship with lenders, right? It's, from on your back end, on your wholesale providers. How did that, change or adapt during this time?
Actually, yeah, that was the biggest change in our business. We had obviously started life working mostly with NBFCs, small, medium-sized NBFCs. We had even acquired our own small NBFC, and that was our kind of domain. We were always pitching to the larger banks and trying to evangelize the product construct and this digital, version of a consumer credit product, but we weren't getting a lot of traction. As soon as that first wave hit, we were deluged, honestly, with inbound conversations from large public sector, private banks. And that's been one of the biggest shifts we've seen in the last 18 months. We've managed to massively increase the pool of lender partners that we work with, and importantly, bring on board some of the biggest blue chip names in banking, which brings not just, a lower cost of capital, more credibility, but even now new ways of working. So we're working together with them to basically activate more of their customers to be BNPL customers. So you'll probably know this, but in India today, we have some 900 million debit cards in issuance, but less than 60 million credit cards. And banks are not naive to that. They would love to solve that gap. And we're turning out to be one of the ways they can solve that. They would have known that before the pandemic, but they wouldn't have invested in it in the way that we're seeing now. There is a genuine shift from the top down, I say this, from the boardroom, to make these not just channels, to your point, to make this a core product offering. So it's a really exciting time for the industry because we're going to see some very innovative collaboration now between banks and tech companies. I think it's really day one in that, yeah.
No, that's fantastic because it's been sort of at the anvil of an inflection point for a really long time, and perhaps we just needed a slight overhaul and shake up of the system to really push things beyond beyond the edge there. But obviously all of these integrations, partnerships, and expansion and growth that we're talking about, comes with some degree of regulatory oversight, which probably needs to be sharpened, adapted to the current context, of things. So Ram, given your experience working with large lenders and the entire cross-section, both on the traditional as well as on the fintech side, how do you think the regulatory regime surrounding fintech lending, has that changed so far? Do you expect more changes to come? What do you think is going to happen?
See, I think it is, it was kind of, so it was all about acquiring customers and this thing, right? People did not think about risk and did not think about consumer risk, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I look at that part, consumer protection has probably become a bigger factor. And this was again, this is probably few bad apples in a large basket. All of us are doing the right thing for our customers, but then there's always someone who does this and then gets kind of blown out of proportion, right? So in a way I would look at the regulatory involvement is good, okay? Because first of all, it means that fintech is now mainstream. Okay, it is not some small part of the whole ecosystem, but then it's part of a larger ecosystem. So which is where in the last 7 to 8 months there have been different RBI committees which have looked at the whole fintech and the impact of it. So one was obviously the whole innovation and things like that. How do you make things easier, right? I mean, with as simple as like a video KYC norms coming in, or even the e-NASH, e-sign, those aspects of it, and how do you kind of protect even, see, at the end of the day, you're lending, you have to collect, right? That's a business. Okay, so you can't just say that don't be cautious about your collections, right? Okay, right. So I think that was a part of it. So the other part is the RBI committee, which was set up under Chris Gopalakrishnan for the entire innovation part of it. Right? There's another committee which has been set up on this one, where they are probably coming up with saying that you be self-regulated. So I think it is necessary within the community that we make our own process of change and all those things. One of the things that we are doing in the whole context of the DLAI, right, is looking at information security and the whole part of it. How can we be a lot more compliant? Okay, because I mean, in the terms of what kind of information and with all the privacy bill coming into play, I think it's necessary to be proactive, and I think the regulators are coming in the right time to give the right guidance. So they are not kind of putting in checks and balances to say that don't do this one, right? So they're saying protect consumers, protect your interest, and that is really important.
So fantastic. Absolutely, Ram. I think the industry has been, fairly heavy on self-regulation, but I think collaboratively it's probably the right time as we're hitting some sort of critical mass in terms of, the broader participation that we need to start formalizing some of these things, again, in consultation with the different stakeholders, including, operators as well as customers. So maybe this is a good segue or check-in point to see if we have any questions, perhaps from the audience that we should be taking at this point. Okay, so while we're getting some of these responses from the audience, maybe it might be a good stepping point also to discuss now that we've sort of come out of this second wave and we're sitting where at a point where business momentum has really been strong. How are we gearing up for the future? If you were to crystal ball gaze a little bit ahead of the next couple of quarters, how are we prepping ourselves? Any thoughts, Telezi?
Yeah, no, it's an incredible time. It feels like this is the era we've all been waiting for in this industry for a long time, and everything that takes a bit longer is a bit sweeter when it finally comes. But it really is a time of exhilarating growth, adoption, and across the whole ecosystem. And I'm sure Simple are seeing the same thing. But finally, retailers, manufacturers, brands, merchants, payment gateways, as well as consumers, understand these products and have kind of come up the learning curve. It's almost like we spent the last few years, doing the groundwork, educating the market, and suddenly, thanks to the pandemic, the adoption is just taking off. I think it's going to be a really exciting time, but I'm glad that you brought up the regulatory point, and Ram said it really well. The reason we are so excited about India as a market specifically is that we actually have very granular regulation already, I believe. And we used to operate in Europe, which was a lot more of a grey area, especially when it comes to products like the one we operate, which is buy now, pay later. There was some discussion, is this loan, is this credit, is this payments? In India, our discussions as the Digital Lending Association with the RBI make it very clear that they view these as loan products. There are very clear existing guidelines and infrastructure. And so because of that, we actually have a great framework with which to grow alongside the traditional banks and all of the ecosystem. So in a way, I think the industry here, by coming a bit later in the journey compared to the rest of the world, will be built in a more stable and secure and therefore scalable way. And what we will do is take the learnings from what went wrong in other markets, particularly around data security, I think, consumer consent around data access, and we'll be able to incorporate them now as we go through this kind of hockey stick growth, which net is going to build a stronger industry and a safer consumer, which is better in the long run for sustainability.
No, absolutely. And Balu, what about you? Any thoughts on way forward from here? Any prep work? Any plans that you're etching out for the next few quarters?
I think fundamentally what Lizzie mentioned is, I think that inflection point is where we are. We are looking forward to making sure that the environment that we are in is what we actually capitalize on to make sure that we add significant value for the ecosystem partners, right? So many of us, in fact, are creating full stack networks at our end, right? Getting a two-sided marketplace together with merchants and users coming in and doing the work that has taken maybe 40, 50 years in terms of the older context of financial instruments that used to exist, and I think just doubling down on that and making sure that we actually the momentum and adoption that will happen means that we have a responsibility to make sure that all of that happens really well, right? Consumer interests are protected, regulatory systemic risks are protected as well as cybersecurity, fraud, data protection, and so on and so forth. I think we are conscious of what's there out there, and we are conscious of how we need to deliver that as well, and that's what we are prepping ourselves for actually.
Got it. No, thanks for that, Lizzie and Balu. And I think we've got the first few questions coming in from the audience. I think one of the topics that is generally on top of everyone's mind is how have risk levels actually performed during this time? Like if there is any barometer to gauge how we've performed on the risk side of things.
So obviously we don't put explicit numbers in the public domain, but I think one number that's good as an indicator of how different business models perform in a time of this kind of turbulence and acts as an early warning signal is what's called in the lending industry bounce rate. So on due, if you were to collect 100 rupees, what percentage bounces or does not come on that day? In consumer lending in general, bounce rates used to be between, say, 10 and 12%. That was quite normal in our type of industry. You then saw lots of the public banks putting out, their numbers during the pandemic, going as high as 30, 40%. So real severe pain, which leads to an early warning indicator of what eventual losses will be. I would say today, certainly amongst our business and other businesses we speak to, bounce rates are sub 10%, which is a first time actually in history, and bodes very well for not just a outlook in terms of economic resilience, as we talked about earlier, consumer resilience, but also a general trend in consumer awareness. So by going through the pandemic experience, perhaps financial literacy has improved, education has improved, the importance of your credit score has become more meaningful, and so we hope that this is more of a sort of secular trend in bounce rates, i.e. improvement in overall credit behavior amongst consumers. We hope that lasts. There are obviously some contradictory signals. We've actually seen credit card bounce rates have increased as a specific segment, which is a bit counterintuitive. But across the fintechs that we speak to, we're definitely seeing indications of a longer term positive trend.
Yeah, that's good, because I think, even when the bounce rates did increase, in the early parts of the crisis, the trouble was never really with the intent to pay. It was a genuine cash flow, crunch that customers were facing, where we saw the spike in the early buckets, but then recoveries also were similarly sharp when things improved, right?
Exactly.
So there is, clearly, some kind of a positive signal on the credit behavior, the way it's been changing. And I think the more the fintechs and lenders have been working to understand the borrower problem, that that has been reciprocated. So credit behavior generally seems to be going up at a secular level.
Yeah.
And Ram, what have you been observing across the cross section, right? What's your perspective on risk levels?
See, I think risk levels have largely been much more tighter. Okay, and this is not just now, right? I would look at even in 2018 ILFS, this thing, right? At that point, suddenly everyone tightened their norms. So, and it is all quality of risk, like some of the large private banks, right? They are at a 65% approval rate, okay? And it's actually went up during this period compared to 50% approval rate. But then they became much more tighter on the nature of the application assessment and all those things. So, which is where I think again, this all becomes, it is at an industry level, there are still obviously a lot of challenges, okay, depending on the segments that you're in there and all those things, right? And again, a lot of it is to do with economic impact and not intent, right? It is more about the job losses and other things which happen, and thankfully many of them have recovered. So which is there. So you saw certain pockets where there was a lot of stress, and then that still continues to be there in certain segments. It is not that it's gone away, okay. But at an overall level, it is much more healthier, and this is there. And the other part is, I think this is something which is very good about the Indian financial system. Okay, I think it's probably our saving behavior or the risk averseness, right? That every time we see some symptomatic problem in the market, right, whether it's the government, whether it's the regulator or the industry, right, all of us quickly clamp down and say that let's be cautious and then we conserve to grow. And I think what I see is right now, the growth opportunities are just increasing. And with obviously, it's great to hear the fact that Zest is and simple and all those things, right? We end up, for us as a business, it's good to know because all our customers are doing well means we end up doing well.
No, that's great. That's great. And one of the other questions that actually come from the audience has been on the growth side. And Balu, I think people are also curious to find out how for you as a BNPL kind of a model, how has merchant behavior changed during this time? What sort of growth vectors are you seeing there?
No, I think so there are some segments within our merchant ecosystem, and we have only an online merchant ecosystem that we work with at Simple. Right? There are some segments which have been impacted, like urban mobility and transportation, etc. But a lot of other segments have been significantly positively impacted by this, be it grocery, daily essentials, online pharmaceuticals, and food delivery, and so on and so forth. Right? And it is interesting to see that the entirety of, I think, the buyer behavior is actually significantly positive towards online transaction at this point of time, and that's really leading to a lot of online merchants understanding that, hey, BNPL, if customers really like the experience that is provided by BNPL, we need to have such options as well, and that's actually led to an awareness of BNPL options. And I was mentioning to someone earlier that the incoming requests that we are getting, if I use that as an indicator of interest, is compounded significantly. Right, we are getting 200, 300 incoming requests from merchants every month to align and sign up to offering our services on their platform, and that's really, I think, the underlying message that is very loud and clear to me, that hey, there is a understanding of what this can do for their consumers from the merchant side today, and that's really driving up all the volumes of interest that the consumers themselves are seeing as well, because merchants are also working with us to then market this and communicate the benefits and so on to the consumers.
Got it. And the last question from the audience has comes specifically for you, Ram, which I think we general curiosity on, and this is something you've touched upon earlier in our discussion as well, that from Perfius' side, how have your models changed in this period of time?
See, I think models have changed, that we're looking at more and more sources of data. So instead of just focusing on a single document, right? So based on the segment, whether it's consumer lending, salaried, right? Okay, or it is a self-employed professional, or it is business, small business, large business, the amount of data that we look at, if I get the amount of data our customers look at and how they rely on us to leverage those parts, right? In terms of cross-analysis and more emphasis on verification, because as you're going more and more digital, okay, you don't want a broken journey, okay, right? But at the same time, you don't want to be leaving yourself vulnerable to a risk. So which means that how do you verify? I think I see that as a big change.
Got it. And Lizzie, you also mentioned earlier that you had to sort of recalibrate some of the models to real-time data. How did that go about? How did that transition happen?
A lot of work on what is one of our core principles, which is affordability. So exactly to your point, intent didn't necessarily take a shock, but ability did, and therefore the accuracy of our understanding of the cash flow of a consumer became absolutely paramount. The other thing we saw, kind of interestingly, is demand as well for our product increased. So they wanted to shop more using BNPL, but that meant we had to be even more sensitive as to what would be the affordability and what were the right limits. So I'd say the biggest improvement we saw in our models is around what we call dynamic credit limit, or line management in a traditional bank. And the accuracy of those models now has been really refined, basis, again, lots of real-time data, transaction data, behavioral data that give us very strong signals as to, has this customer had an income shock, or is his situation improving?
Got it. And Balu, any recalibration from your side as well?
Not really. I think fundamental use of alternate source of data to take a view on a consumer's ability to take credit is what I think remains. But I think what substantially changed was the quantum of limits as the online use cases increased and as the bill size that the consumers used to do has significantly increased. The frequency that they have used to was significantly increased. So we had to calibrate for the credit limit itself and the quantum of the line that's available to a consumer within the period that we have. So that's really what we focused on.
Got it. Okay. And yeah, and with this, if there are any more questions from the audience, happy to take them at this point in time. Or let's it'd be great to sort of start with maybe any closing comments from the panelists here. Lizzie, would you want to go first?
Sure. No, just that this is a really, I think, a tipping point, right, to use your point, or inflection point in the ecosystem. I think it's a time where we're going to see significant change, even in the operating models and business models, because of this coming together of the traditional financial services industry and the technology providers. The two are going to come together in a more dramatic way than we've seen, not just in the India market, but potentially globally, actually. I think this will be, I always say this, but it will be a leapfrog market where we will see new ways of working together as an ecosystem, which are all ultimately for the benefit of the consumer. And UPI has been a great example of that. I think people understand that now. You use your phone pay or your Google Pay, you understand how your bank and your tech provider can work together to give you the best experience. Now expect to see every financial product delivered in that kind of way, that look and feel. So imagine your Google Pay for everything, whether it's insurance, credit, mortgage, car loan. And I think we're going to see a really fast period of acceleration and adoption that will be something the rest of the world will actually look to.
Got it. And has the technology infrastructure that you use at Zest, has that evolved during this?
Totally. I mean, and become way more complex, actually. So in the last 12 months, I think our rate of tech adoption of new forms of technology, complexity to our tech stack, we've fully microservices, re-architected ourselves so that we can innovate much, much faster. And all our products and all our, customers are almost like service users of our architecture. So we've really broken it down. That allows us to run fast, be very lean, be much more innovative. And again, we speak to companies who do what we do in Western markets. We show them our tech and they can't believe how advanced it is. It's far more advanced than what they're building for, say, a UK or an Australia, where it's a one-size-fits-all product. So because of the complexity of India, the diversity that we see in the customer base, we all have to build more complicated businesses and tech stacks, and actually the rest of the world is now looking to India for that.
Got it. No, that's fantastic, and hopefully that is again more permanent shift towards using more digital, more tech in everything that we do. Any closing comments from you, Balu?
What I would like to say is that some of us operate in a space called Buy Now Pay Later, or BNPL, right? This was a term that was very, very closely held within the fintech space. A few early consumers adopting to it. But like we've seen in the rest of the world, BNPL has really taken off post-pandemic, and we are seeing the inflection point of that in India as well. And I think that BNPL is going to be a breakout category over the next 3 to 5 years, right? Where customer interest adoption is going to significantly increase. And what is also going to be clear is that BNPL obviously has different variations, right? So what, say, Lizzie does at Zest to what we do at Simple are slightly different variations of this. And I think the consumers will start understanding that. And adoption of BNPL as an option which customers really like, especially as we think about this entire set of, millennials and Gen Zs who are new to credit or who don't have credit cards or whatever else new to the ecosystem, who all of us need to rely on with non-traditional source of data. As they become more and more mainstream and as they start becoming, a bigger chunk of the consumer pie, I think this is a sector that's going to be significantly positively impacted, and that's what I'm optimistic about.
Absolutely, and credit in any form is always instrumental towards a goal, towards a certain purpose, and the way BNPL kind of fits in to just a general transactional flow when you're not really talking about credit, but you're talking about reducing friction and easing convenience, increasing convenience there. It's definitely very rapidly in sunrise category at this point in time.
100%.
And finally, Ram, any parting thoughts from you?
Yeah, so you see, I obviously completely echo the sentiments by Lizzie and Balu, and I see that this is obviously one of the part is this is a trinity, right? It's a trinity of the financial institutions, the fintech, and now we see all the aggregators, right, or the vertical businesses coming into play. So we see the, my this thing is obviously buy now pay later is there, which is largely consumer focused, but there is going to be a variant of it which is going to come for the whole SME, right? And that is going to be the next wave of growth, because obviously financing of the SMEs and giving them the right kind of credit line is very critical for the entire macroeconomic growth.
Super. Thanks for that, Ram. So I'll just take this time to thank our amazing panelists for sharing the insights of how they've sort of ridden the last 1.5 years like warriors. So thanks Lizzie, thanks Balu, thanks Ram, thanks for sharing. Thank you. So with that, back to you, Amit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Varun. And a big thanks to all our speakers. And as Lizzie said, it is indeed a tipping point in the lending or the fintech industry itself, right? Thanks for a very insightful session.
Where there is life, there is hope, there is meaning. But life has its downs as much as its ups. Life is about challenges. Life is about opportunities. Time for joy, time for celebration, and time to introspect. Thankfully, in every one of life's moments, and even beyond life itself, there's LIC. Where there is life, there's always LIC. Zindagi ke saath bhi, zindagi ke baad bhi.